Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to lecture number 7 of Object-Oriented Programming course. In the previous lecture, we have seen static class members, data members, and member function. So if a data member of a class is static, this means that all the object of that class can access that data member, either it is private or public. That means they share this data member. It is like a global data member in the structured programming language. Global data member is a member that is shared among all the function of that program. So a static data member is like a global to all the object of that class, and a static member function is a member function that is invoked with the class name, and that can only access the static data member of the class, that shouldn't access the other non-static data member of the class. Then we have seen the information hiding concept in detail, and we have make a library to show that concept. Let me demonstrate this concept a little bit with the help of diagram. So in this case, in this library we have a header file distance.h and .cpp file distance.cpp. So header file contains the definition of the class and the prototype of the member function of that distance class, right? And this distance.cpp class contains the definition of the member function of the distance class. So with this library we compile it and make a static library, and we get distance.a. So distance.a is a static library that contains the definition of the member function of the distance class, and this is basically the developer side. So we are the developer, we make this library and we hide the detail of the implementation of the member function of distance class. Now we give the client a header file that is distance.h, so that, and the library.a. So this library.a is not in a readable form. So ये library readable form में नहीं है, but the distance.a file tells the programmer or the client or the user that what are the different functions present in the file, what are the different functions of the class, what are the different member function of the class distance, and what are their prototype, and also the private data member of the class distance. So what the client do is basically he uses this file and write a main.cpp file that contains the main function and uses this library and header file. So main.cpp file को जब वो compile करेगा, he has to include the library path as well. We have seen this in the previous lecture, how we can include this library and a .h file, and then it compiles that file and use the functionality of distance class. So now in this case, at the client side, the client uses the functionality of a distance class without knowing the implementation detail of the member function of the distance class. So this is one of the example of information hiding, that a developer hides the implementation detail of the class member function from the client or from the user, right? So in today's lecture we will see what is an abstract data type and container classes, proxy classes, and a little bit if we get some time, then we'll see what is the operator overloading. Now abstract data type. So consider the built-in type integer. So when we write int x, it creates a variable in x and associates some memory to that variable. Now how much memory is associated? The memory that is associated is 4 byte. So if it is integer variable unsigned, if it is unsigned int, it can be unsigned int, or it can be simple int variable that could have a sign minus or a positive sign. So for unsigned, for int variable, it uses 1 bit for a sign, and rest of 31 bits are used to store the value, right? So the largest number we can store in 31 bits is 2 raised to power 32. That is some number. So still it has some kind of limitation, right? We cannot store the number bigger than that, that is bigger than 2 raised to power 31 value, right? So most people associate it with an integer in mathematics. That is, it represents, so when we write int x, so it represents an integer in mathematics. So actually int is an abstract representation of the integer. Why we say abstract representation? Because ints are fixed in size, that is 32-bit, and in which 1 bit is a sign bit and rest of 31 bits are used to store the value. So the maximum number that you can store, the maximum positive number you can store is 2 raised to power 31, right? So if the result is out of range, then what happened? An overflow error could occur, or quietly it produce a wrong result, incorrect result. So mathematical integers do not have this problem. There is no limitation. You can write as many big number as you can, right? But there's this limitation is with the integer in programming language like C or C++. So the built-in type are only approximation or imperfect model of a real-world concept. So they are, we can say that int in C++ language is just the approximation of the integer in mathematics, right? So the types like int, double, character and other are all example of abstract data type. So these are the data type, but they are at the abstract level. So int is the abstract data type, and it is just the approximation of the integer that can be used in mathematics. So these basic types are called abstract data types. And abstract data types captures two concepts. The first one is the data representation, how data can be represented, and operations that can be performed on that data. So for example, if we say that int contains integer value, and the operation that can be performed on int are, for example, add, subtract, multiply or division, right? Abstract data type in C++. In C++, the programmer uses classes to implement abstract data type and their services. So for example, to implement an array abstract data type that perform the following functionality: subscript range checking, an arbitrary range of subscript instead of having to start with 0, array assignment, array comparison, and array input and output. So in C++, classes also, C++ uses classes to implement abstract data types, because a class is a representation of a real world class, but its classes in C++ they have some kind of limitation, right, as we have seen in the case of integers. So they are basically abstract data types. They are also called the abstract data types. We will see this array abstract data type and write a class for this in our future lectures. Now, what is a container class? Let's assume a real world application, from a real world point of view, that what are the container classes. So in a real life, we use this container all the time, right? So for example, pages in your book come inside a cover or a binding. So these pages are contained by the binding or by some kind of cover, right? So that is a container. You might store any number of item in a container in your garage. So there are a lot of containers in the garage, and you can put some kind of tools in that container, right? So these tools are basically the object of other classes, we can say. So in your real life, you use a container everywhere, and without container it is inconvenient to work with many objects, right? For example, imagine trying to read a book that did not have any sort of binding. So that is very difficult to read, and that is very difficult to contain as well. Similarly, eat cereal that didn't come in a box without using a bowl. So just imagine that you are eating a cereal without a bowl, and it comes without a box. So box is a container for the cereal, and similarly the bowl is also a container for the cereal, right? So now let's see what are the container classes in C++. So from the real world we have seen that we have observed that a container is something that contains the objects. So container, we can say a container is an object. For example, if I have a box, a kind of a box, metallic box, and I put different kind of tools inside that box. So each of these tool is basically an object of tool class, and that box is also an object of box class, toolbox class, right? So from real world we have observed that a container is basically an object that contains the object of other classes, right? So in C++, a container class designed to hold the collection of instance of other classes. Like arrays, stack, queues, trees, and linked list are the example of container classes. So in arrays we store integers, right? So similarly we have stacks and queues that have some places to store some kind of object or value, and that perform some kind of particular principles. That's why they are called stacks and queue. And similarly tree and linked list, maybe we will see trees and linked list also in this course. Now let me show you two important principles of software engineering. The first one is the separating interfaces from implementation, and the second is hiding implementation from user or client. So hiding implementation from user or client, now you have a very clear picture for that you hide the implementation detail of the member function of a class from the user, and that is called hiding implementation from user or client. And what is separating interface from implementation is that you write a header file that in which you write a definition of a class with just the prototype of the function, right? So you just mention the prototype of the function and give it to the client with the library, and that library contains the basically the implementation detail of the member function of that class. So this is like you separate the interface of the function from the implementation. So implementation is in the separate class, and you provide just the interface, that is the function call to the client to use that functionality. So we achieve this by defining a class in a header file and implementation of the class function in a separate C++ source file, and then we make a library. Now, does that solve the problem of hiding implementation detail from user? Because consider this class, as I told you before, and as I showed you in the last lecture, that we have write a definition of the class in a header file by just providing the private data member and the prototype of the function, member function of that class, as shown in the slide. So we just provide the prototype of the member function in that class, distance class, but we don't show the implementation detail of the member class. But that is not actually enough to hide, because with this information, now a user or a client know that what private data member exists in the distance in your class, and what are the different parameters you are passing to the function, what are the name of the functions, and he can realize that how these function can work maybe. So this means that all the things are actually not hidden from the user, because a user can see the private data member of the class, because you are providing the definition of the class with the class private data member and the class member function, public member function, prototype of the public member function of the class. So with the prototype and the private data member, he can predict that what kind of implementation is provided in the detail of in the definition of the member function of that class. So one should hide the private data member from the client. So we should be able to hide whenever we give a library to a user, that is perfectly fine. But with the header file, we want to hide the private data member of our class, and also the function name and the function prototype of our class. We want to hide all the things from the user, and we want that user should be able to use our library and call the function of our class. Now how this thing is possible? So this thing is possible using the proxy classes. A proxy class allows to hide the private data member and other function of a class from client, right? We'll see how we can make a proxy class. So providing client with the proxy class enables it to use your class service with known implementation detail of your class. So that proxy class enables the client to use the services, or that is the functions calling the function of your class by the clients. So that proxy class is there, and a client can use that proxy class to call the function of your class, or to get a service. A client can use that proxy class to get a service provided by your class without knowing the private data member exists in your class, and the detail that you provide in the form of the prototype of a function of your class, right? So member function की जो prototype है आपकी class की वो भी visible नहीं होगी if you use a proxy class, and the private data member that exists in your implementation class doesn't also appear to the client. So this is what we actually want, and this is actually the information hiding is. So there's the implementation class, and the detail of the implementation class we want to hide it from the client, right? Then we introduce an interface class. So interface class is actually the proxy class. So this interface is actually the proxy class by using which a client can call a function from the implementation class. And then the next one is the client class. The client uses a main function, and it actually calls the function of the interface class, and then interface class invoke the function of the implementation class. So with introducing the proxy class, that is interface class, in this scenario we avoid the client to see the implementation detail of the implementation class. Implementation details means that the list of the private data members and the prototype of the member function of the implementation class. Let's go and write a program, and in fact the program is already done. We just want to see the program. So in that program there are actually three classes: implementation, interface, and client class. Client class is actually the main.cpp, right? Let's go to the program. So this is the program. Let me show you the detail of the implementation class first. So this is the implementation class. The only private data member in this class is the value, int value, and this is the constructor of the class, right? So you are passing some value v to that constructor when you create an object, and it initializes the private data member value of the implementation object with the value v. And then there is a set value function and get value function. So for set value function, when this function is called with the object of implementation class, it passes the value v, and this value is set to the value of the private data member of implementation object. And get value is a constant function, and it returns the value of the private data member, that is value of the implementation object, right? And interface class, this is the interface class. So interface class, there's one thing that should be noted, that interface class have the same function name as of the function of the implementation class. So जो proxy class होगी उसके functions के नाम और function की prototype वही होगी जो actually आपकी implementation class के functions की prototype और functions के name हैं, like set value, get value. So in implementation we have set value, get value, while the constructor is different. So the only private data member of this class is a pointer ptr that points to a memory location, that should point to a memory location where an object of implementation class is stored, right? So that is only the private data member of this class. Now in the constructor of this class, what we do is we are allocating a memory for an implementation object and passing it, calling the constructor and passing the value v. So it initializes the private data member of that object, that is value, with the value v, and it returns a pointer that will be assigned to a ptr pointer variable, right? So ptr is a simple pointer variable. So ये जो ptr के बाद जो brackets लिखी हुई हैं, they are same like if you write like x10. So if x is a private data member and you want to initialize it with value 10 in the constructor, you write something like this. ठीक है, so आप within brackets लिख देते हैं जो value होगी. So we write this expression within brackets because it new operator allocates the memory. जो memory allocate करेगा उसकी type क्या होगी, implementation type होगी, and then it call the constructor. Since object is created, it calls the constructor passing it a value v, and that constructor initialize the private data member of that object with the value v, and it returns a pointer. So this calls return a pointer, right? So new operator returns a pointer, and that pointer value will be assigned to ptr pointer. Now ptr pointer points, or we can say ptr pointer contains the address of the memory, and on that address we have an implementation object, right? And then there is a set value function, and with set value function what we do is write ptr arrow and set value. So now the interface class contains a pointer, and with that pointer you can call with that pointer you can go to that object and call the member function with that object. So with this statement you are referring to the memory where an object of implementation type is stored, and then you are calling the function of implementation class. Or we can say, so this is something like same like if I write static ptr dot set value v. So this is the same actually, right? And then in the get value function, so basically get value function returns some value, and internally it calls the get value function with the implementation object that is stored in this memory location. So through that pointer you refer to that memory location, and then you call a function. So this function get value will be called with this object that is of implementation class. So implementation class का जब get value function call होगा, it return an integer value, so that value comes in that place, and then that value will be returned where you call the get value function of the interface class. And then we have a destructor for interface class that is used to free the memory that is allocated for that interface object, and this memory is allocated in a constructor right over here, right, with the new operator. Now within the main function we have we created an interface an object of interface. So what we do is we don't know what is implementation.h. We are just given with this file, that is interface.h file. So we have a client have interface.h file. It don't know what is implementation.h, so it uses this file. Now you can see in this main function we are just calling the function or creating the object of interface class. We won't create an object of implementation class. So interface class is a kind of a proxy class, and because from the main function we call the function of interface class, that is a proxy class, and then that proxy class calls the function of implementation class. And implementation class is a class whose detail we want to hide from the client. So एक object जहाँ पे बन रहा है interface I, and we are passing a value 5 to it. So it calls the constructor, that is the constructor, right? So when the constructor is called, what it do, it allocate a memory for the implementation object and pass it with value v. So the private data member of that object, that is value, is initialized with v, and the pointer to that memory is returned, that will be stored in ptr object, right? So ptr object जो है वो उसमें pointer आ जाएगा. So interface का एक object बन जाएगा, और interface का object जो है it contains 4 byte for the pointer ptr, and that pointer points to a memory where you have an object of implementation class. And then you can see out interface contains i.getValue. So you call the function getValue with the object I of the interface class, and When you come over here, so this function is called getValue. It is a constant function. So this means that it cannot change the value of the private data member of the object which invoke this getValue function. And then in this the definition of this getValue function, that is the member function of the interface class, we invoke the getValue function that is a member function of implementation class. And with which object we are invoking? With this object we are invoking. So interface class का पास एक pointer है, and that pointer points to memory location where we have an object of implementation class. And then we call the function i.setValue equals to 10. So we are calling the function of the interface class and passing it value 10, and interface class, then the definition of the set value member function of the interface class call the set value function of the implementation class. That is, with this it invoke that function and pass it value v, and in implementation what it do is it set the value of the private data member value of the object that invoke, that is created in a constructor when the object I is created for the interface class. And then we have a cout statement. Interface contains i.getValue and then after set value and system pause. So firstly we assign the value 5 when we create an interface object, and then we assign a value 10 and afterwards. Now interface object, when the interface object is created, the implementation object is also created, and interface object creates a pointer that points to a memory location where we have an interface implementation object is stored, right? So let's compile this program, okay, and execute it. Let me change. So interface contains 5 before set value, interfaces contain 10s after set value, right? So before set value and after set value. Now still we have one problem here, and that is that within the interface class, if you go to the interface class, now we can this interface.h, it contains the definition. It contains the definition of the function, member function of the interface class, and you can see in this definition we are calling the function of the implementation class, right? So that should also be hidden from the client, because a client knows that these are the function of the actual class जिसकी implementation उससे hide की जा रही है, right? So this means that it doesn't fulfill our requirement actually. So what we should do next? We should use a static library. We make a static library, and this static library contains the implementation.h file that contains the class definition of the implementation class. It contains the class definition as well as the definition of the member function of implementation class. The second class is interface.h that only contains the class definition of the interface class with the prototype of the member function, right? And then we have the interface.cpp. Now this file contains the definition of the member function of the interface class. And then we make a library with that is library.a, and we are going to provide this interface.h file and library.a to the client to use it, right? We will make the library now. We just want to repeat it so that you can know how to create a static library and actually what is the function of static library. Then then you can provide library.a and interface.h to the client. Now by viewing interface.h or library.a, the client won't know the implementation detail of the interface class as well as the implementation detail of the implementation as well as the detail of the class definition of the interface class and the definition of the member function of interface class. So interface.h से ये बात reveal नहीं हो रही कि interface कि जो फंक्शन डेफिनेशन है वो क्या है, और उस फंक्शन डेफिनेशन से आप इम्प्लीमेंटेशन क्लास के किस फंक्शन को कॉल कर रहे हैं, और ना ही इनसे ये चीज़ रिवील हो रही है कि कि कोई इम्प्लीमेंटेशन क्लास के मेंबर फंक्शन की प्रोटोटाइप क्या है और इम्प्लीमेंटेशन क्लास के प्राइवेट डाटा मेंबर क्या क्या हैं, राइट. We create a library and then interface.h file, and then we give these two files to a client. Now let's go and write and make a library. So to make a library, first we have to make a new project, file new project, and then this is a static library, so we can write project underscore Proxy C++ project. Okay, we must provide a location to save it. Now we use a folder library, and we want to save this project underscore proxy underscore lib. This is a library, right? Now we are going to create a new file, new file, new file, and new file. Let's save it. So this is a interface.cpp file. Second one is the interface.h file, and the third one is the implementation.h file. Implementation.h file, right? So let me copy paste the code. So this is the class interface implementation.h. Let me copy it over here. Okay, and then interface.h file. So interface.h file. Now we have to separate the function details and the function interfaces. So this is interface.h file that contains the function सॉरी इसको यहाँ से कट कर दीजिएगा प्लीज, क्यों नींद आ रही मुझे. Now this is the interface class, semicolon. It just contains the definition prototype of the functions that are present in the interface class, right? So that's it. Control S, and this is .cpp file. So we have to remove it. So I is capital, interface scope precision operator. Okay, so we include implementation, and we also include interface.h. So within interface.h we include implementation.h, so just remove it. So this implementation.h. within interface we include implementation.h file, and then we have this file .cpp file that contains the definition of the member function of interface class. Let me check whether these files are safe. So library in, oh, this is, we just ignore, forget to put n, so this is implementation, save as, or I can say, so यहाँ पे implementation class के spelling गलत हैं तभी वो वहाँ पे error दे रहा है, so इसको मैं यहाँ पे close कर रहा हूँ, close, then I can rename and then we can just open it. Okay, now we have implementation class, control S, so semicolon, destructor must be member function, yes it is a member function, interface I think should write like this. Okay, so now it create a library proxy underscore lib dot a, right? So now what we can do is create another folder that is, let's say, client. So we provide interface .h file and this project proxy underscore lib file to the client. Paste. So these two classes are provided to the client. Now we make another project, file, new project. Now this is a console application project, C++ project underscore, let's say, right, main. So this project contains the file, C file, .cpp file that is contains the main function. Then let's save it on the desktop. Library client. Okay, so this is a main function. Let me copy the, so सबसे पहले हमारे पास सिंगल फाइल थी, अब हमने एक लाइब्रेरी बना ली है एंड देन वी हैव अ मेन फंक्शन टू यूज दैट लाइब्रेरी. ठीक है, ओके, and simply ignore and include so पहले हमारे पास एक सिंगल फाइल पे सारा काम हो रहा था. दैट मीन्स वी हैव अ मेन फाइल, अ फाइल दैट कंटेन्स अ मेन function and interface .h file and implementation .h file. ठीक है, so उसमें अगरचे हमारे पास इंटरफेस .h में से का ही हम ऑब्जेक्ट बना रहे थे मेन में और उसी के मेंबर फंक्शन को कॉल कर रहे थे और इंटरफेस .h से इम्प्लीमेंटेशन .h में जो क्लास है इम्प्लीमेंटेशन उसके मेंबर फंक्शन को कॉल किया जा रहा था. नाउ वी सेपरेट दीज थिंग्स, वी मेक अ लाइब्रेरी, now you can see this is a library, this one is the client side, that contains the main function and it uses that library. So we make a separate folder for these. So this library folder contains, these are all the things for the library, and this folder contains the client things. So we provide a .a file that is a library file and interface.h file that is the interface header file to the client, right? So this is the client side. Let me open this interface.h file as well. Okay, now this is interface.h file that we are going to provide a client. Now you can see by viewing this class, it doesn't contains the definition of these functions. ठीक है, इन function की definition इसमें provide नहीं की गई. So we don't know actually how the definition, within the definition of this interface class, the developer, the creator of the file is calling the function of the implementation class, जिसकी implementation वो hide करना चाह रहा है, उसको कैसे function call करेगा? We don't know this detail from here, right? We don't know the private data member of the implementation class. Yes, we know the name of the class, but we don't know what are the private data member of the implementation class by seeing this header file, right? So within this main, you include this header file, and now what we do is we have to include the project path, right? So you can see the menu, file, edit, search, view, project, come to the project, and then project options. Then you have tabs, click on the parameter tab, and then click on the add library and object. So click on it. This is the proxy class. Within proxy class we create a library folder, and then within the library folder we create a client folder. So this is a client side, and this is the library we are going to use. So we click it on it and open it, so it is included, and then click on the directory tab that is next to the parameter tab. Then we have to provide library directories and include directories. So library directory is this client folder, right? Add, and that is also the include directory where the header files exist. So if you have the include, you can have an include directory different from the library directory, right? So you can have a lib directory and where it contains the library, and then you have an include folder or directory that contains .h files. So we provide these two and click OK. Now we can, let's see if we compile it. Gives the error. Okay, this is the reason. Maybe we can, because we haven't provided the implementation.h file, right? So what we can do is, if we create a project file within the interface, we said that class implementation instead of including, right? So we include this class basically, or we say that we are going to use the object of this class within the interface class. So that's why we write it over here. Now you can compile it again, and it create a library. So let's go on the folder. So this is the library folder, and let me delete the library first, and let's create it. So we have changed interface.h file में आप include नहीं करेंगे implementation.h file को, because you have to provide implementation interface.h file to the client, not the implementation.h file, because you want to hide the detail of the implementation class. So that's why you just write a class implementation over here, because you are creating something or some either the object of that class or the pointer to that class. So you just write the name of that class, right? So it's already there in the project here. So इसको आपने यहाँ पर इंक्लूड कर लिया interface.h को, बट यहाँ पर हम implementation.h नहीं लिखेंगे, हम यहाँ पे class name with class and the name of the class, जिसकी implementation detail हम hide करना चाह रहे हैं, और जिसका कोई object या कोई pointer हम interface class में बनाना चाह रहे हैं, उसको इस तरह से यहाँ पे mention कर देंगे. Now if we compile it, it create the library. Now we copy the library. इस लाइब्रेरी को हम कॉपी कर लेंगे, कॉपी इट एंड पेस्ट इट टू द क्लाइंट साइड, और ये क्लाइंट को लेट्स से ट्रांसफर कर दिए. ओके, कॉपी एंड रिप्लेस, यस, रिप्लेस इट, एंड वी हैव टू चेंज द इंटरफेस फाइल एज वेल. वी हैव टू गिव द इंटरफेस फाइल एज वेल बिकॉज इट इज नाउ चेंज्ड. पेस्ट. ओके, नाउ कम्स टू द, so interface.h has been changed. Okay, haven't loaded the change. Okay, so let me open the interface.h. So this is interface.h, and so this is interface.h file, right? So let's compile. So we provide the interface.h file to the client. Now it doesn't include the include directive that is hash include implementation.h. Otherwise we have to provide implementation.h as well, right? So let's compile it. Let me check what if you compile it again, it gives an error in interface.h. We're actually missing something. Let me first check what we are missing. So I already created this library lib and client already. So let me check out what could be the possible problem. I have already I haven't write this thing. Let me tell you what is the problem actually. So this is our implementation class, so we have to include this thing over here as well. Okay, so we have to include implementation as well. So this is our project and this is our interface.cpp class. Now we have to include this implementation class as well. Why? Because we are using it in this file. So just include this implementation.h file so that it includes it knows what is implementation class, right? So now I think, let me check this interface.h as well, and that is perfect now. Okay, so I've created this library before this lecture and it works perfectly fine. Now I'm looking what are the possible problem here, what we are missing. So now it's okay, so we can just go and delete. So this is our library. Now I'm deleting this library and creating a new, this one or this one. So this is our library source code. It contains the implementation.cpp file, it contains the interface.h file, and it contains the implementation.h file. ठीक है, so implementation.h में actually हमारे पास implementation class की डिटेल है जिसको हम हाइड करना चाह रहे हैं. So let me compile it, see if there is any error. Okay, what we can do is we can just open this file that I already compiled and already checked, implementation, interface, and so now it creates, it works perfectly fine, but let me check what are the possible problems. Okay, I got it. I think I got it. Okay, interface.h, implementation.h, return type is void, return type is int, and when we compile it, in the file included from interface.cpp, so is there any spelling mistake? No, there's no. Okay, so I think so the spelling are not correct actually. That is the problem we are facing. In the interface.h we write class implementation, we include this class basically, or we declare this class rather, so the spelling is not actually the correct, so that is the problem we are facing. So now implementation implementation.h. okay, now when we compile this we get there's no error and we get the library file. Now what we can do is we can copy this library file from the library folder. So this is the library file, we can copy it and paste it to the client side here, paste, and now copy and replace it. Now we come to the client project. This is the client project which have main function, and this is the interface class, right? Now let's compile it. Now it is compiled successfully and we can now run it. Let me change the properties. So this is the output. Interface contains 5, so that is the value before set value, and then we call the set value function and set the value 10. So interface contains 10 after set value. Okay, press any key to continue. So what we did is we basically create, this is our project file, that is the library project. Let's close it and let's close this as well. Now this is the library project and this is the main function, the client side, right? This is our side, the developer side. We create a project and we write all the implementation detail of the implementation class, and then we have an interface class that contains a pointer to the object of the implementation class, or that contains a pointer that points to the object of implementation class, right? And then using that pointer we invoke the function of implementation class within the definition of the member function of interface class. So interface is a proxy class. Now what we did is we make a library and provide interface.h and that library.a class to the client, and that interface.h file contains the definition of the interface class with just the prototype of the member function of the interface class, right? So, and there's only private data member that is shown to the user, and that is the pointer to the implementation class. So with that, user or a client should only be able to know that there is a name of the class, that is implementation. Rest all the things of the implementation class are hidden, right? So this is the concept of the proxy class, and by using the proxy class we can actually hide the implementation detail from the client or from the user, right? So if I write a very big class and that is like a project, I did this project for some client, maybe like for example a software company, right? They do the project for a client, so they have in that project they make, let's say, 10 to 15 classes, assume, and then they can make a library and then give it to the client or embed this within the software so that client is not able to see the source of that file, right? और प्रॉक्सी क्लासेस को यूज़ करते हुए हमने इंफॉर्मेशन हाइडिंग के प्रिंसिपल को सक्सेसफुली इम्प्लीमेंट कर लिया है. इससे पहले भी हम इंफॉर्मेशन हाइडिंग का मैं आपको बता रहा था okay, we can use information hiding by writing the implementation of the actual class in a separate file, and then in the header file you just write the class definition and the prototype of the member function. But with that, and you provide that header file to the client, but that header file reveals that what are the private data member of your class and what are the prototype of the member function. But with the proxy classes, this is also hidden, that what are the private data member of your implementation class or your class जिसकी डिटेल आप यूजर से हाइड करना चाह रहे हैं, एंड व्हाट आर द डेफिनेशन और व्हाट आर द प्रोटोटाइप ऑफ द मेंबर फंक्शन ऑफ दैट क्लास एज वेल. Next we will see what is an operator overloading. So we have already seen that services are obtained from objects by calling functions, that is by sending message to the object, and that is sending message is equivalent to the function call. So we have an object, using that object we call a function, that is we are sending message to a object, and this function call is sometimes cumbersome for certain kind of classes, for example mathematical classes. So you just want to avoid the function call all the time. For example, in the case of mathematical classes, we will see how. So for example, a statement like d3 dot add objects d1 comma d2. So we have seen this kind of function in the distance class, where we add distance contained by the two object and store it in d3, right? And we have also seen something like this: d3 is equal to d1 dot add objects d2, right? So it adds. So this is the that member function of a distance class, and it adds distance contained by d2 and the distance value contained by d1 and store it in d3. So this is annoying, like always calling the function with the objects, and that is difficult to remember whether we have add object function whose prototype is like this, that is passing only two parameters, or whose prototype is like this, that a function return a value, right? Instead of this thing, so this can be changed to more readable and more conveniently understandable thing, and that is this one. What if we write d3 is equal to d1 plus d2? So this also means that we were adding d1 object, the content of d1 object and the content of d2 object, and the result is assigned to d3 object, right? But this thing cannot be achieved implicitly by C++. You have to do something explicitly, that is you have to overload this plus sign so that it can add two objects of a distance class, for example. So operator overloading refers to giving the normal C++ operator such as plus, multiply, less than, equal to, and there are a lot of operators additional meanings when they are applied to a user defined data type. So जब user defined data types, that is classes, so जब classes के object के साथ इनको use किया जाएगा, so what is the purpose of these operators? So आप उसमें ये बता सकते हैं. So this means that you are providing the additional meaning to those operators. So plus sign दो integers के लिए यूज होता था, दो integers को ऐड करने के लिए या दो floats को ऐड करने के लिए, but you can use a plus sign to add two distance object, for example, right? But for that you have to write something explicitly within the definition of distance class, and we will see what we have to write it. So operator overloading gives you the opportunity to redefine the C++ language. So by using classes to create new kind of variables, and by operator overloading to create new definition for operators, new definition for already existing operators, right? Example of C++ overloaded operators, we have used these operators many times. So addition, that is plus operator, and subtraction, minus operators, they are overloaded operators. How? So plus and minus operators perform differently. Well, the plus operator, it adds two things, and subtract operator, it subtract basically two things, but depending upon the context in integer arithmetics, floating point arithmetics, and pointer arithmetics. So if we add two integers, it performs differently. If we add two floating point numbers, it performs differently because now it is adding two floating point numbers. And in case of pointer arithmetic, it performs differently. So if we have a pointer p and we want to add 1 in that pointer, then this means that we are adding actually 4 if that pointer points to an integer value, right? So the plus operator or minus operator performs differently, and depending upon their context they performed, right? So for the adding two integers x plus 2, it performs differently, and for adding 2 in a pointer that points to integer value, it performs differently. It already, although it adds something, but the addition value in case of the pointer is different as compared to the in case of integer arithmetic. So that plus operator and minus operator is already overloaded, right? You can still overload that operator to be used in your class, right? Then stream insertion and extraction operator, that is used with the cout and cin. So these operators are also overloaded operator because this less than sign and greater than sign are bitwise operators. So less than is used both as a stream insertion operator and as a bitwise left shift operator. We have seen this bitwise left shift operator in the previous course, in the Introduction to Computer and Programming course. And this greater than sign is used both as a stream extraction operator and as a bitwise left shift operator. So दोनों पर्पस के लिए यूज होता है. तो इसका मतलब है कि इस ऑपरेटर को ओवरलोड किया जा चुका है, ठीक है. इसी तरह से प्लस ऑपरेटर इंटीजर्स के लिए था इनिशियली, देन सी प्लस प्लस लाइब्रेरी में यही मेंशन किया गया कि पॉइंटर अरिथमेटिक में अगर प्लस यूज होगा तो उसका मतलब क्या होगा, ठीक है. सो इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि प्लस ऑपरेटर को ओवरलोड कर दिए. इसकी बेसिक फंक्शनैलिटी दो इंटीजर को ऐड करने की थी. नाउ वी कैन ऐड सम वैल्यू टू अ पॉइंटर एज वेल, एड्रेस ऑफ अ पॉइंटर, right? And we can still overload that operator for the number of user defined classes. इसी तरह से left shift operator, that is a bitwise operator basically, and in C++ it is, this operator is overloaded and it is called stream insertion operator, and greater than sign, that is called stream extraction operator, and that is actually bitwise left shift right shift operator. So this less than and greater than, that is stream insertion and stream extraction operators are overloaded in C++ standard library that is called std, right? So there are some fundamentals of operator overloadings. So job performed by the overloaded operators can also be performed by explicit function call. We have seen this, that we have a function add objects or add dash function. We pass two objects to that function and that function returns us some object, or it assign the addition result of d1 object and d2 object to a invoking object. So we know that we can perform the same kind of operations using the explicit function call. So programmers can use operators with user defined types. C++ does not allow new operators to be created. So you have an existing set of operators that you can use to overload that operator for a user defined classes. It does allow most existing operator to be overloaded so that when these operators are used with objects. This is a very powerful capability of C++. An operator is overloaded by writing a non-static member function definition. So if we want to overload a plus operator for a distance class, for a distance object, to add two distance object, we have to provide the definition of the function in the distance class, and that function should be a non-static member function, right, of the distance class. So the operator is overloaded by writing a non-static member function definition. So function name becomes the keyword operator followed by the symbol for the operator being overloaded. So you have the so function name किस तरह से बनेगा आपके पास? You have to use a keyword operator to write a function for any operator to be overloaded for that class. So फंक्शन का नाम में ऑपरेटर लाजमी यूज होगा. सो ऑपरेटर आ जाएगा, फंक्शन का नाम स्टार्ट होगा ऑपरेटर, एंड देन द ऑपरेटर दैट यू वांट टू ओवरलोड, एंड देन द ब्रैकेट. लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल operator is the keyword, then the operator, for example plus operator, we want to overload that operator, and this is the function parenthesis. If we want to pass some argument to that function, we can. We will see how. And this is the function opening bracket and closing bracket containing some statements, right? So the function name operator plus would be used to overload the addition operator plus. So assignment operator equal, that is equal sign, may be used with every class to perform member wise assignment of the data member. For example, if I write d1 is equal to d2, then this means that I want to copy the content of d2, the value of the private data member of d2, that is feet and inches, into the private data member feet and inches of d1 object. So the statement like d1 is equal to d2 semicolon, so copying the content of the private data member of d2 into the private data member feet and inches of d1 object. So we can overload assignment operator for any class like this. There are some restrictions on operator overloading, and these restrictions are operators that can be overloaded. These operators are, this is the list of the operator, contains plus, minus, multiply, divide, mod, and you can see some logical operators as well, and or, and this is not, and then relational operators as well. So this is the list of the operators you can overload. There are some other operators that cannot be overloaded, and these are the scope resolution operator and dot operator and so on. So you cannot overload these operators. So this is the list of the operators you can overload it, and moreover you cannot create new operator to be overloaded. So attempting to overload a non-overloadable operator is a syntax error. Now precedence, associativity, and number of operands. So precedence means which operators to solve first. So we have seen this precedence in the previous course, that if we have the multiply, divide, mod, plus, minus, equal operator, then which operator should be solved first. So precedence means the priority of the operator, right? So the precedence of an operator cannot be changed by overloading, right? So overloading आप कर सकते हैं operator को. For example, plus is a binary operator, it will remain the binary operator, but the precedence of that operator cannot be changed, right? So plus उसी for example अगर multiplication और plus में type होती है, तो multiplication operator will be performed first. And there is one more thing, that if we want that addition should be performed first, then we can use a parenthesis. That is also used in the simple mathematics, कि अगर आपने parenthesis लगा दिए हैं, तो जो parenthesis वाले expression है, that should be solved first, right? The associativity of an operator cannot be changed by overloading. Associativity means that whether you have to solve from left to right or from right to left, आपने किस तरीके से उसको solve करना है expression को, right? So overloaded unary operator, plus plus and minus minus remains the unary operator. So in C++, the associativity of the operator is from left to right. You start solving the expression from the left side, and then you move on to the right side. For example, if the two operators, let's say multiplication and division, or the mod operator, that have the same priority, right, and they occur in the expression, then there is a tie. Which operator should be solved first? Then you have to start solving it from left to right if there is no parenthesis, right? So overloaded unary operator plus plus minus minus remains unary operator. So आप plus plus minus minus को overload कर सकते हैं, but they cannot become a binary operator. They remain unary operator. इसी तरह से overloaded binary operator will be a binary operator. They will not become a unary operator, right? So that is end of our lecture number 7. In this lecture we have seen the concept of the proxy class in order to hide the implementation detail of the class which we want to hide from the client, and then the container class, and then we have seen the introduction of the operator overloading. We will continue from here in our next lecture. Thank you very much.